connected. So today is the birthday of three, historical presences in history. I mean, in culture. Trajan, the Roman emperor. I misspelled. I didn't misspell, but when I prepared this presentation, I did it for a Romanian audience. It should have T-R-A-J. It's Trajan. Peter Smithson, the British architect, and the musician Jimi Hendrix, all born on September 18th. And this is, so he was a Roman emperor who was living between the year 53 and the year 1107, meaning 117. So he lived for 64 years, Roman emperor. So the Trajan's Forum in Rome that he built was a very important and still is an important part of Rome. And the plan of the buildings was he was very fond of architecture, and so lots of constructions had been built. But now, of course, there are only ruins. Here you see the plan of his architecture, the Roman Forum, the Trajan's Forum, with an equestrian sculpture of Trajan, and then all kinds of other buildings, library. You see, very important knowledge, library. The column of Trajan was here, the equestrian sculpture of him was here, and then these lower buildings around it. We are going to see other pictures of this, large complex that was built 2,000 years ago, or almost 2,000 years ago. So there are now, it's not far away from the Colosseum, and is distinct from the Roman Forum. So you have the Trajan's Forum, quite large, as you can see. If you look at the scale of the Colosseum and the scale of the Trajan's Forum was, significantly bigger. And here you see a more detailed plan, the Forum of Caesar, the Forum of Augustus, but this was the most ample, Trajan's Forum. The Temple of Trajan was here, the Trajan Column was here, the library here, and the Basilica, Ulpia. So there were all kinds of functions, both secular and sacred, brought together. Although the sacred at that time, of course, it was pagan. They were pagans. They were not Christians, although the Christians did exist at that time in Rome, but not here, not in Trajan's Forum. Foro di Traiano, the Trajan's Forum, Foro di Augusto, Foro di Cesare. Foro della Pace. Interesting that there was also a forum for peace, although these emperors, they were warriors. They conquered many lands and many people, Foro Romano and so on. Anyway, but it's interesting that existed a Foro della Pace, the Forum of Peace, the Foro of Nerva, Foro di Nerva. Anyway, so this was Emperor Trajan in Rome, and here you see the Trajan's column, which is adorned with bas reliefs from the war he waged against the Dacians in what was to become later Romania. And I read now with maybe unavoidable touch of patriotism here, but I read that the sculptors who adorned the statue, the the column with scenes from the war on Dacia represented with a lot of dignity the head, the severe head, the head of Decebalus, the king of the Dacians. And I read an American historian said that this showed that the Roman soldiers, the Roman warriors, valued, appreciated very much the courage and the dignity of the Dacian king. Apparently, it's the face with the most dignity. And again, this was written by an American, Durand, I forgot his name, but an important historian of the United States. And here you see again, you know, some of the functions. The statue of Trajan on horseback, the plaza, the entrance with the triumphal arch, the Greek library, a Latin library. Interesting that, you know, there were two distinct libraries symmetrically placed, the Latin library and the Greek library. Then the temple dedicated to Trajan, quite ample, and the Trajan column was here, which exists today. So this was a reconstruction of Trajan's Forum. And these are renditions, you know, rather recent about what, you know, we imagine was there, you know, the center of power in the Roman Empire. You see the top of the Trajan's column here. So he was represented twice, once on horse and once on top of this column. Now, if this looked exactly like this, we don't know, but based on the plans and, you know, studies and archaeological evidence, perhaps to an extent at least, it was an architecture not very dissimilar from what we look at now. So this is Trajan's column, but I'm always confused because there is another column in a different place, which is very similar, and I have to study it more because it's unclear to me if that one is the actual column of Trajan or this one. I thought this one, but they are very similar. I don't know what the other one is. Anyway, you see, you know, empires go up and then they go down, and it's unavoidable. One day our skyscrapers will fall, but nobody thinks of that moment. You know, the Roman Empire collapsed, and so collapse all empires. But we don't think of this. We think that we last forever. It's not the case. It never happened, and it never will. So again, the Latin library, the Greek library, the Trajan's column, the temple of Trajan, the equestrian statue of the emperor, meaning Trajan, and Rome all around it. Here he is, a very important emperor. Any emperor should have been important, and some of them, though, are more important than others. And here are scenes from the column of Trajan depicting the war, which was a very important war that the Romans waged against the population living around here at the time, meaning the Dacians. It is clear that considering the importance of the column, Trajan's column, it is clear that for the Emperor Trajan, this was a very hard fought war, and the victory was very valued. And here you see, this is Decebalus, who actually committed suicide. He cut his own, head, his throat, in order to not be caught by the alive by the the colonies, the future colonies, the Romans. Here he is again, and that's what I read. And again, if you see, there is a difference between the representation of other heads. This is what I read by the historian Durand, a North American, but probably a French ancestry historian, who said that the way he's represented on the column shows that the sculptors and those who erected the column for Trajan valued Decebalus a lot. They respected him, even though he was defeated in the end, but they respected him. So this column represents power, centralized power. And, over the centuries over thousands of years of human history, even in the poorest village somewhere in the world, there are columns celebrating power, the power of someone, the power of a god, the power of a human being. Obelisks are, desired and valued everywhere. In Place de la Concorde in Paris, there is an Egyptian obelisk. What is he doing there? Then not too far away, in Place Vendôme, I think there is column with or an equestrian statue with King Le Soleil. So everywhere, the one who was in power was valued and maybe even feared, and the column celebrated that power in emphatic ways. But here, it shows again how important this war was for the Emperor Trajan and for Rome. If the most important symbolical structure that they build, a column, depicts, is actually showing on these spirals scenes from that war. This says a lot. Anyway, you see here, the head of Decebalus, and it was brought to Rome. Anyway, sad. This sad because human beings always fought, and I'm afraid they will always fight. And unfortunately, we cannot, not unfortunately, it's good in a way, we cannot afford another war, but I don't know for how long we can abstain, because there is so much, inability to communicate in peaceful terms between two brothers, or a husband and a wife. Forget about two people, two different countries. This was the flag of the Dacians and their symbol. This I like this, this I would say charged with symbolism, this image. Maybe, I thought that in Romania, perhaps the flag should have this again on it. Anyway, so it was the birthday of the Emperor Trajan. I showed a few things by the way of this about the Trajan architecture in Rome. And now we go to a very important British architect who was born also on September 18th in 1923, Peter Smithson, who worked with his wife and partner, Alison. Alison and Peter Smithson, that's how they are known in the history of modern architecture. Allison and Peter Smithson, and here they are. And at one point, they were the best known British architects in the world. They didn't build a lot, and they didn't actually build in a very spectacular way, but they are very respected even today, and perhaps with good reasons. Here they are, again, probably in love, most surely in love, working together, laboring with a T-square and a rectangle in all the days. Here they are, Allison on the left, Peter on the right. You can find on YouTube videos with them or with him. There is one with him where he's attacking Le Corbusier, drawing, schematically showing them as architects, meaning as buildings, almost, at least the heads. And here they are again, sometimes the British sport interesting shirts, like not as interesting and extravagant like the shirts of Bruce Goff, but still, these inflowered shirts. But then it was, I guess, in the 60s, the hippie movement, even if Mr. Smithson didn't have very long hair, but the shirt at least was in the spirit of the times, I guess. Anyway, drawings, some drawings by them, because they work together, so you cannot really separate Peter from Allison. They did competitions, like most young architects who try to, get commissions, they work on competitions. So this is a drawing for a building which they actually built. And they built this one as well. We are going to see it in London. Now I just show some drawings. I don't know what this person is doing here, but interesting drawings in a way. The drawing, the building is very, in a way, minimalistically represented, drawn. But then you have these human figures, kind of alert, at least this, and then this one even more, punctuating space in, rather engaging ways. And at that time, of course, they drew manually. Here is an important French actor. I forgot his name. Philippe, something with Philippe. Anyway, these are just renderings or drawings, which, again, you can do a very, sensitive and relevant drawing with simple means. You just build a perspective. Simply, it's a modern building, and then you introduce some elements of, you wonder how could we, objectively, you cannot see this here. Like this is not just glass, but it works because I think rendering is not just objective, it's also subjective. And, you can place here a famous French actor, and it's okay. Now, this is an interior. We are going to see a house of the future that they imagined. This is a building. I think this was built in London. I'm a little bit confused because this axonometric looks a little bit different, or maybe it's just a project for a competition. This was built, and we are going to see it, kind of interesting. And I like this urban planning, which is, it's not Cartesian. It has a movement, almost a subversive movement, if I can call it so. It has a level of intricacy and, a little bit labyrinthical. So it's not just order here. It's also also a certain level of a certain degree of disorder. Not so much in this section. I mean, talking about disorder. Now, the House of the Future project, which was built for an exhibition, is here. And, you know, the future, I read somewhere that Brazil is the country of the future, and it will always remain so. Here we have an interior which was dedicated to future, and perhaps, although this was done probably more than 60 years ago, or around 60 years ago, 55, 60 years ago, it could still be somehow, you know, the house of the future. And here we see some interesting, you know, notations or, you know, data, so to speak, you know, heated flooring. This was done. The nylon clothes. Now, I don't know about that. I mean, nylon clothes are not so comfortable. Glass reinforced chair. Okay, trolley with warmed compartment and the infrared griller. So this was really about the future, you know, wishful thinking. Table rises from floor. Well, from where should it rise? Well, I guess, yeah, when it says rises, it's like that it could go down into the floor again when it's not used. Folding perspex chair. I don't know what perspex is, but I guess some kind of a plastic. The plastic finish molded walls. The transparent plastic wall. So plastic appears a few times here. Times change now because today plastic is considered, you know, not really a sustainable material. But at that time, there was no interest in so-called sustainability. So, you know, the clothes were imagined to be, even desired to be made of nylon, and then, you know, transparent plastic walls and folding perspex chair and plastic finish molded walls. Okay, we see other images of this under project, an axonometric image of the plan, which is kind of interesting, even by today's standards. Ideal homes. This is the plan, and it is interesting. You know, somehow it's more interesting than the built work. It looks more, you know, complex somehow, and even visceral to an extent, not to a large extent, but still. It's a rectangle, but within the rectangle, there are islands of organicity. Most of them, I guess, in plastic or, you know, derivatives. An interesting plan, nevertheless. And, you know, something like this could be done even today by Japanese architects, or not just Japanese architects. I was thinking a little bit of the Rolex Center by Kazuyo Sejima and her partner. This was the original drawing for this house of the future. And other images where you see they didn't, they were not concerned just with the house, but also with the inhabitants and the way they were dressed. So there was some kind of a meeting between architecture and fashion. Here is the plan again, and it looks interesting. You know, it is interesting. It shows clearly that they had, you know, artistic concerns and talent and aspirations, yes. So this was built based on that plan that we saw there. Those magical 60s, you know, when the world was flirting with optimism and energy and revolution. I suggest to you to watch a very nice film by Michelangelo Antonioni, the very important Italian film director. It's called Blow Up, and the action takes place in London around that time in the 60s or early 70s. It's a very nice film, and it's about kind of what we see here to an extent. Now, of course, the man is reading the newspaper and the lady is cooking, because this is, concerned with preparing food, while he is leg over leg, reading the newspaper with his back towards her. So, welcome to the discrimination between man and woman. Even in a progressive society like the British society of the 60s. Nice bathtub. Now, build projects. I mean, besides this, installation, the Smithson High School in Hunstanton, Norfolk, from 1954, 1954. So almost 70 years ago. I like this building. It's kind of an international style building, but it's very well crafted, and it's somehow the presence of this stone wall adds something to the work. You know, the structure is very clearly defined and expressed, but there is an elegance to it, and so the work is honest in its display of materials and structure, but there is a feeling of it's not a heavy building. I mean, this is heavy here, but the major part of this complex is not. Maybe that one was not even built by them. It's possible. And I think even for the present, this building doesn't seem to me to be an old-timer. If you build something like this today, it would be considered quite legitimate somehow, even if it's not a fluid architecture, it's not an organic architecture, it's it uses rectangularity and a Cartesian spirit, but it has an elegance that I think should be appreciated. And the interior, as you can see, has colors, primary colors. It's a joyous, actually, building. It's not an oppressive building. 1954, École the School of Hunstanton, Norfolk. Now, a house from 1956, the Sugden House. Yesterday, we had a discussion with a young architect who participates often at our meetings on Zoom, about the new and the old, but about invention and tradition. Now, here we see an example where actually they try to negotiate between the old and the new. There are interventions that are clearly by them. They were not part of the old building, but they are incorporated in an older building. They didn't build this building, in my opinion. You look at the chimneys, these are old. So they brought the new to the world, to the old. So there isn't really a frontier, a brutal separation between the new and the old. It's some kind of a, intertwining, intermingling. They try to create some kind of a cooperation between what it was before and what the present time offered to them. Even the interior, this is an interior which is ambiguous in a way, because on one hand is kind of, connected with tradition, with the past. Even the pieces of furniture add to this feeling. This is really what the past, did. But then at the same time, there are maybe this big opening is a rather modernistic intervention. And you see in this elevation, it's a building that probably maybe they amplified, but it's a building that has modern insertions like these windows, and they are simultaneously present on this facade with a door which I'm sure was not designed by Allison and Peter Smithson. It's such a difference between this framing of the window and this door. This is an old door, but this is not old. So you have the old and the new present at the same time in the anatomy of the building. And this you see also in the interior. There are parts which belong to the old, there are parts which belong to the new. And yes, it's not a radical architecture, it's not. They try to insert touches of modernity within an older building. And I think they succeeded to an extent, and it is kind of interesting, this cohabitation between the old and the new. It's not always easy to do this because you can arrive at a certain cacophony. It's difficult actually to marry, stylistically different elements in the physiognomy of the building. They did more, this is an early work. They did more radical works later. We are going to see them. Interesting also the drawings, the renderings, the manually drawn, elevations with something, childlike in a way about them. They have a certain innocence, which I think is a quality. That's not how a mature architect, professional architect usually draws. But I like exactly this fact that it is in a way childish or childlike. The Upper Lawn Pavilion in Fonthill Estate, 1959, 1962. Here we have a building that is more resolutely modern, but they kept the old wall. And this also, I like the fact that, they didn't try to create a pure so-called architectural object, but they tried to marry existing, things like this wall, which is not even in great shape, but they kept it, and I think it was a good thing. And here you have a fragment of a previous wall, so you look at this architecture and you look at this, and yes, they belong to two different worlds in a way. But the tree, this tree grows here in a dramatic way, attached as it was probably to the old wall, and then extending itself on the new facade. I like to think, and maybe that's how I put it correctly, that the tree is attached with more affection towards the old world than towards this, because really, how could you marry, this, the artificiality of the new with the, with the organicity of nature? Yeah, you see, it cannot even attach itself to the opaque parts of the elevation. It can't. It's I don't know what it is here, maybe metal, you know, but here it can, and it did. But it's an interesting project. It's an interesting work, you know, because it's modern, it's clearly modern, but then there are parts of the old that they kept. And I like the way, you know, the rooms open, you know, towards the courtyard or the open space, kind of a little bit like some houses by Lacaton and Vassal. Interesting also that they used a ladder which is, you know, abrupt, and Mr. Neufert would have protested against, but this is done everywhere in the world, and, you know, it works. You might even have pleasure in using an uncomfortable stair, which is actually not demanding. I mean, it is demanding in the sense of using it, but otherwise it's a modest presence in the house. The house is more or less a box when you see all the doors closed, and definitely modern. But I like very much the pavement here, and also here, you know, it's some might say it's not perfect, but this is a virtue that it is not perfect. It's like the bark of the tree almost, except that it's horizontal and is done with stones. The stone finds itself also inside the house, and you wouldn't expect to find, maybe it's the chimney here, I don't know, but when you look at the exterior of the building, you wouldn't expect this kind of wall inside, you know, but it is. So I think they attempted to unite the opposites: modernity with the past, the metal covering of the facades or the frames of the windows and the doors being at the same time, you know, in cohabitation with stones and bricks and so on. Now look at this. I like this, you know, and in fact, it's very relevant to the discussion we had yesterday, that here we don't see a frontier between the old and the new. Quite the opposite, they try to unite them. But of course, the new shows itself as the new, and the old shows itself as the old. But they are married in the way they were able to do it, to express. This picture in particular, I think, is very relevant to this discussion. Is it possible to bring the new into the old and make them work together? I think it's possible, but it's not easy. It's true, it's not easy. I think the tension between the old and the new creates a richer environment. You know, even this old bench here, and you know, the way the building opens up in the corner with the stairs a little bit not quite perpendicular, it seems, on this wall, at least the first ones. Anyway, an interesting little house, I would say. Allison and Peter Smithson. They built also collective housing. They were very interested in social housing, collective housing, apartment buildings. And you can see on YouTube several videos with this theme. So now we arrive at a building in Piccadilly in London, you know, in an important area in London, the Economist building from 1959 to 1965. There are actually several buildings. It's not just one, but they all belong to the same function and the same companies. This one was by him, this one also. And yeah, you might say from today that they are, what's so special about them? But I think they were masters of discretion, actually. You can, if you study carefully the buildings, you discover subtleties that at the first sight you might not see them. Yes, it's the language of 70, 60 years ago. Yes, it's done with a certain, reticence, but still they have, I think, a certain monumentality, which is not crushing. I mean, yes, there are even, not perhaps innovations, but look at this huge window here. It's huge even by today's standards. And then smaller windows. I think it's an interesting work. I myself didn't analyze it too carefully, but I think it deserves to be analyzed. The Economist in London. I think I have an image also seen from far away, and you can see it's actually a cluster of buildings. It's an office building, that's what it is. For Homo economicus, I imagine. But you look at the existing old buildings, and then we look at their proposal and what was built, and yes, they are modern, but somehow they are not, irritating the old. I don't think they are. I read that Allison and Peter Smithson were actually the best known British architects for a certain period of time in the 50s and 60s. And this is not a little thing. So they built these three buildings plus this addition here. And, again, these are modern and this building is not. But there is a certain level of, I don't know if intimacy, but interconnectedness or a desire for some kind of a dialogue, to respect each other. And, it's done. I don't know, I didn't visit these buildings, but I imagine it's a pleasant environment where you assert, because the new was asserted, but at the same time, the old was not, insulted with the new interventions. Garden building at Oxford, St. Hilda's College, 1968. This is also an interesting building and also almost puzzling. I look at the facade, you wonder, what are these? Is this the structure on the carcass of the building? It's Peter Cook tried, well, not quite like this. In Vienna, he built a building across the street from the building by Carme Pinos, and also across the, if we can call it a street, it's a peatonal pedestrian walkway in the students' campus from the library by Zaha Hadid. And he has wooden, it's not structure, but some kind of a wooden, elements on the facade. Here we also have wood. You wouldn't expect wood to be the exterior of the facades in this way. It's because it's almost like the rural is enveloping the urban, and this is very interesting, I think. Why they did it this way, I don't know, but it is interesting. And where you have in a campus like Oxford done something so, in a way, provocative, because the meeting between the rural and the urban often is tension, if not provocative. Because it's a hybrid structure, you have the concrete structure, and then you have these elements which are, you wonder, they are not structural, but what is their role? Interesting. It has to be studied. Other pictures with this complex of buildings are perhaps less interesting. But we see also the same language in wood that we see outside. And I like this. It's this meeting between what we call the rural and what we call the urban. And these touches of rurality, if I can call them so, might refer to a certain affection towards the past, towards what we call tradition. But they bring warmth to the building, although the building is in its planning, in its specificities, it's actually a modern building. But through these wood presences, I think the possible brutality of modernity is softened. And yes, I think it's interesting, this idea to marry wood with concrete in this way is, I think, innovative. And the plants seem to like the building. That's why they climb on the building. A private house extension for Lord Kennet, Bayswater in London, 1960, but no pictures, sorry. Now this is a very important work by them, but was destined for demolition. And I think they saved it. But it was a big discussion in England, in Great Britain. They did want to demolish it, the Robin Hood Gardens housing complex in Poplar, East London, but I think it was saved. It's something, it's a brutalist housing complex. It's for, it's social housing. It's for underprivileged people, and it's quite big. Yes, it is a lot of concrete here, it's true, but I don't know. I mean, it depends on the perceptions, it depends on the subjectivity of anyone. But if I look at this facade, I wouldn't really describe it as being brutal. It still has a study and proportions, the windows, the openings. It has a certain movement. Yes, this wall is of concrete, but even the wall is divided into vertical parts. And I'm not saying that it's very, very gracious, this wall, but I have seen blocks of flats much less graceful than this. But they wanted to destroy it. Apparently, what is funny is that Peter Smithson talked, and you can see the video on YouTube, where he kind of almost made fun of buildings by Le Corbusier, l'unité d'habitation, because they invited vandalism on their outside. But this happened to their own building the very same way, maybe in an even more resolute or obvious way. So there were actually two buildings, quite long, and with this garden park in between them. But you see how taste changes, because when they were built, they were considered innovative, progressive, beneficial, and so on. And then some years later, you see the section at the top. Some years later, I don't know, 30 years later or so, they became undesirable and ready for the bulldozer. So again, could you actually say that this building, and look how interesting is even the staircase, you know, how it becomes ornamental to an extent. And the facade has a certain rhythmicity and this fragmentation of I would say of a rather, it's not without sensitivity, this building. I wouldn't describe it as brutal. It's maybe not sweet, it's not a sweet building, but I wouldn't call it in brutal terms as being brutal. And also, funnily, is, you know, if you are to compare it with L'Unité d'Habitation by Le Corbusier, uh, you know, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is an important building by them, this Robin Hood group of people, but Robin Hood Garden. Interesting also the name, because Robin Hood, we know what he was. So you couldn't do an architecture that is completely devoid of some level of heroism, even, you know, because Robin Hood was in a certain way a hero, even if some might consider him a negative hero. Um, I like the fact that the access into the apartments is done from an exterior corridor. I always say that it's very convenient to, because you get cross ventilation in the apartments. You see people can actually talk to each other on this corridor. Is a place, an additional place where people could meet. We cannot truly say the same thing about the interior street, la rue intérieure, inside the l'unité d'habitation building by Le Corbusier, because there is no natural light, there is no ventilation. It's different. Here is, you know, you look over the parapet, you see trees and the sky and the city. So I think it's much more conducive to meet people here and talk and so on. I don't know. I think this was a project done to change them somehow, to so-called improve them, improve the building. But personally, I don't think, you know, yes, taste changes. It's a social housing complex, quite large, but I think it testifies about a certain time and a certain place and certain architecture, certain architects. And it has personality. I mean, why is this building better? You know, which was built later. It's hard for me to know. This also probably used prefabrication. I imagine that these elements of the facade were prefabricated. So it had elements of even this wall here. You know, there is an element of progressivism here. And here you see the apartments having access from the exterior, you know, balcony or corridor. They are modest apartments, but I think they function very well. And they are duplexes, you know, you have 2 floors at your disposal. So I wouldn't say at all these are, you know, apartments to be teared down, to be, you know, cursed and demolished. But taste changes, yes. What can you do? Allison and Peter Smithson. And here we see also details of the facade. It was crafted in a certain way. It's not so simplistic as it might appear at first. Now, buildings at the University of Bath including the School of Architecture. Here it was not very clear to me what they did. Maybe they mingled so well with the existing and the old that I don't know. I tried to discover what exactly they did, because there were existing buildings. They also worked with a team of other architects. But still, this architecture, which is not impressive and is not, wow architecture, I think is not a simplistic architecture. And there are interesting things here. Probably if you use the buildings, you would discover things that just looking at pictures is probably difficult, or if not impossible. In a way, this is the British spirit, where tradition is important, and there is a conservative side to the British culture, and at the same time, they also have very innovative gestures. But somehow this building, compared to this building, the little I see here, this one seems to have a certain hybridity and complexity. Discreetly shown. Now we arrive at the third person we celebrate today, and I'm going to show an architecture work built by a contemporary architect, inspired in part by Jimi Hendrix. So Jimi Hendrix died at 28, and he was, as you know, a remarkable guitarist. You are going to see the work built by Kop Himmelblau, Wolf Prix, who inspired himself or themselves, well, himself first, because he's the founder of the company, of the firm, and I'm sure it was his idea to inspire himself in this building from Mozart and Jimi Hendrix. Kop Himmelblau, mini opera pavilion. And here it is, built first in München, in Germany, but I think it was meant to travel to other, you can disassemble the building and build it somewhere else. And it is a building that seems to say, épater la bourgeoisie, provoke the bourgeois. And I like this side of Kop Himmelblau, that they try to, and they succeed. This is amazing. It's not just that they try, but they also succeed in building their proposals. And we are going to see in what way Jimi Hendrix inspired this pavilion, mini opera pavilion. So from the Emperor Trajan to Peter Smithson, Allison and Peter Smithson, now to Kop Himmelblau and Jimi Hendrix, and let us not forget Mozart as well. This is a building that I like by Kop Himmelblau. It's yes, a little bit aggressive towards the noise of the cars, as the explanation goes, but I think it's more than that. I think it's the non-conformism of its creator that tries to wake up the bourgeois, to provoke the one who is, rather sleeping and not truly living. Yes, it's a building that is sculpturally enticing and provoking. It's dynamic, and you will see the raison d'être of that dynamic quality. This is. I keep saying this, that if architecture is not an adventure, it's not an architecture. You need this aspect of adventure, of a creation which could be risky, but you have to assume the risk. You have to assume the meaning of what danger and adventure mean. And art is really about this. Art, if it fails in showing alternative modes of being, to wake us up, to provoke us, then art doesn't deserve its name, really. And architecture at its best also doesn't deserve its name if it betrays a courageous, assuming of what we call risk. I mean, think of Mozart, and think of Jimi Hendrix, and think of their music, their creation, and think of their unconventional lives. They both died young. I think Mozart at 37 and Jimi Hendrix at 28. But they left something behind, and listening to their music cannot leave us indifferent. And looking at this building, also, it cannot leave us indifferent. It stirs us up. It provokes us. It wants us to maybe even change our lives. To become more exuberant, to assume risks, to live adventurously. That is creatively. Here is Jimi Hendrix. Hello, Mr. Hendrix. Happy birthday to you. We are sorry you died at 28, but some people think that it doesn't really matter how many years you live. If you live intensely and truthfully, like Van Gogh, for example, or Mozart for that matter, it's okay, I guess. But still, you could have lived a little longer. But your music is still living with us and inspiring us. And you were indeed incredible. I mean, you played the guitar like Hey Joe. You play the guitar even with your teeth, and with the guitar behind your head, and so on. I mean, you did unbelievable things. You were in a way like the acrobat of Le Corbusier, who chooses to do the impossible, although nobody asks him to or ask him to do the impossible. Where does this desire for doing the impossible come from? Well, I guess it comes from the inside of the artist. It's almost noblesse oblige. You have to do it if your name is an artist. So look at him, enjoying himself, living intensely, ruining a guitar, his own guitar. Is this inevitable relationship between destruction and construction, between saying no and saying yes? And some people even think that, you have to destroy what you love. And in a way, that's what he does here. He destroys what he loves, his own guitar. Look at the tension of the hands, and look at the expression of the face. Anyway, here he is as a man of the 60s, cultural gypsy, a hippie, an extravagant man who had the courage to express himself in a flamboyant way. But then, as Oscar Wilde said, moderation is always a fatal thing. Excess always succeeds. And he lived excessively for a short number of years. But again, he left something behind him, and that is his music. And that's why we wish him now happy birthday. And this is the plan of the pavilion, the mini opera pavilion by Kop Himmelblau. It looks more, exuberant in the rear. I mean, in photographs. But here you see, let's say some kind of a justification for these pyramids emerging from the body of the pavilion in order to fight back to, yes, art is fighting back against the noise of the car, is protecting itself because this is an opera pavilion. There is music being performed here, and the music doesn't allow the car to abuse it. So it protects, at least in the desiderata. The building shields itself with this, geometric, configurations, these pyramids that seem to say to the car, please behave. We are not going to allow the noise generated by it inside the building. And good for them. I hope they succeed in doing so. And here you see the reference to Mozart and Jimi Hendrix. And I love this, you know, because Kopfhimmelblau uses high technology and very skillful manipulators of this technology. And this was, you know, apparently the design of the pavilion was inspired and generated by these two pieces, musical pieces, one by Jimi Hendrix and one by Mozart from Don Giovanni. This was a Purple Haze, and the vibration, the emanations or the musical, I don't know how to call them, which were in a computerized way, were graphically recorded. Apparently from these two together, the building was born. The pulses and impulses, the emanations, the sound emanations of this music generated through scripting and programming, the volumetric realization of this architecture. I don't want to use it object, because for me a building is more than an object. So this building was born from these two musical pieces in this way, using high technology, you know, and this is, I think, inspiring, because the goal here is not technology. The goal here is expressivity, and you arrive at expression by using technology as a means. And in this way, you humanize the technology. The technology becomes a means towards a purpose which is not in itself technological. I like this building very much, and I wish it would come even to Bucharest one day. Anyway, yes, it's as I said, it's the exaltation of the artist that refuses to be dwarfed by banality and by the bourgeois. So it's the eternal conflict. You know, I keep saying this. An art critic told me that the bankers, they always talk about art, and the artists always talk about money, because we always talk about what we don't have. The banker doesn't have art, and the artist has art but doesn't have money. So, you know, this building is showing the power, the expressive power, in a way, the revenge of art, the revenge of the artist. And bravo to the artists and the architects who made this revenge resolute and physically expressed. Bravo to them. We need more such manifestations. So our hearts are warmed up by art, because this is what art is supposed to do, to warm up our hearts. And you can see the bourgeois, because I imagine these were not blue-collar workers and not really proletarians, most of them. Enjoy coming to the provocation of the architects and the artists and the musicians, you know, be them, Mozart or Jimi Hendrix. They need art. And in a way, we are all together, the banker with the artist in the gutter. We are all together. And this we must understand. We need each other. Here are the people with the money, but the ones who express their soul and their talent and their creativity are the artists. We need both, perhaps. Anyway, let me finish before I become more exalted, because good architecture exalts me, and so does good music and good art in general. The artist is supposed to bring non-conformism to life. And if the artist doesn't do that, I think he or she betrays his or her raison d'etre on this earth. all these diagonals, all these planes which are not, you know, quietly, you know, respecting the orthogonal, you know, placidity of, you know, of a geometry which refuses to be engaging. All these things are actually representing the non-conformism of the artist and of the architect and of the musician. Look at him. Happy birthday, Mr. Hendrix. And happy birthday, Mr. Hendrix. You you continue to astonish us and to inspire us. Thank you. So happy birthday to all three of them, actually, even to the conqueror of Dacia, Emperor Trajan, and even to, I mean, not even in this case, without even to Peter Smithson, is his birthday, and to Jimi Hendrix, the musician who left us at 28. Thank you.